All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Here's part 2 of our respiration unit. We're going to jump right back into following up on our pathway, and today we're going to be talking about the breathing mechanism. So what we want to think about is how we're able to bring that air into our lungs and out of our lungs, and what controls that. So that's going to lead us to our big picture ideas. And our big picture idea, printed out here, is how we breathe. So what allows us to bring in and breathe out the air, and then what controls it. So what specifically is going to regulate our breathing. So the things that you need to know before we get into how this all occurs is what the diaphragm is. So our diaphragm is a muscle, and this muscle allows, when you contract, it's pulling on down on our rib cage. So what it does is it's allowing more air to come in, which we're going to talk about a little bit more about the diaphragm in a minute when we talk about inhalation. Intercostals, these are all the muscles in between our ribs. It's the yummy part that you guys like when you're eating ribs, pork ribs. Pleural membranes, these are just the sacs that are that contain the lungs. There's going to be some fluid in between. The reason why there's two sacs and fluid is so it reduces friction. So this fluid, when you're inhaling and exhaling, what happens is the fluid on the membranes allows them to slide past each other, which will decrease the amount of abrasion. Chance of me spelling that right, pretty slim. And then the last thing is in our alveoli, like we talked about last day, there's stretch receptors. So when there's a certain amount of air that's maxed out, there's a signal from the brain to stop increasing the lung volume, which prevents the alveoli from bursting because of too high of pressure. All right, so let's talk about the breathing mechanism. First thing we're going to talk about is inhalation. One thing you need to know is that this is an active process. It uses energy in order to facilitate this. So what happens is our diaphragma, contracts. And when it contracts, it pulls down. Okay, so what happens is it's pulling down, as you can see here. The other thing is the intercostals are contracting as well. And what this does is it causes the rib cage to pull up. So ribs pull up and out. The whole reason why these two things are so important is because what this does when you pull up and out and the other end pulls down, it increases the amount of volume of the lungs. And if you increase the volume of lungs, there's not going to be any extra air in there necessarily. And so what it does is it reduces the amount of pressure there. And air likes to be regulated. It likes to be pressurized. So what happens is it moves to equilibrium. So air is going to rush in to the lungs in order to equal out those air pressure differences, just like we saw when we made the artificial lung today. Okay, so the main thing that you need to know about inhalation is it creates negative pressure in the lungs, and that negative pressure is filled with air that rushes in. Okay, the second part, exhalation or expiration, is the exact opposite process. So this is passive, so no energy is required, and then both of the diaphragm and the intercostals are going to relax. So if the diaphragm relaxes, the opposite thing's happening and it raises back up. So it moves up. And the intercostals are going to lower back down and move back in. Okay? And what this does is, because the volume decreases, is it increases the pressure, and that increase in pressure compared to the outside of your body, the pressure or the air wants to leave in order to reach that equilibrium. So the air rushes out. And this is because it created a positive pressure. Okay. All right, the next thing, and this is a little bit tricky for some folks, it's the breathing control. So what actually allows us to not consciously have to think about our breathing and to make sure that it still gets carried out the correct way, and it all has to do with the medulla oblongata. So this is the reflex center of our brain. So these are things that you don't have to think about. So there's what it does is it detects changes in CO2 or carbon dioxide. And it doesn't do it directly by looking how much CO2 is in the blood, which we'll talk about tomorrow, because CO2 doesn't directly diffuse into the blood very well. It actually detects H+ or hydrogen ion concentration. So we'll just put in brackets through hydrogen ions. And if the hydrogen ions is too high, so which indirectly means CO2, so if the CO2 is too high, it sends the signal to the ribs or the intercostals and the diaphragm to start the inhalation mechanism. We'll just say to lungs to start inhaling and exhaling. Okay? That's the main mechanism on how our respiratory system is maintained. It's all based on CO2. So that's why if you've ever seen anybody revived on TV where they have a oxygen mask on them, there's actually carbon dioxide that's in there as well, because that's what's going to signal it. We don't respond to low amounts of oxygen. That's why if someone ever had a full dose of nitrogen gas to them, they wouldn't feel like they're starving for air. They wouldn't start to feel anything until they would be passing out. Right? There would be no pain, there'd be no desperation to breathe. It's only due to the carbon dioxide that would get you breathing again. So the second one is the aortic arch and carotid artery. We call these ones secondary receptors. And the reason why they're secondary is they just don't have as much control in the breathing mechanism as carbon dioxide does. So aortic arch is the top of the big vessel that's leaving your heart, and it branches off into two arteries that go up into the brain or into the skull. And so the aortic arch and carotid artery, these ones detect oxygen levels. Okay? So yes, the oxygen levels are detected as well, but it doesn't have as much of an impact. So if there's low oxygen levels and still relatively low carbon dioxide levels, it might not make up as big of a difference as if the CO2 levels were going really high. So let's just finish this off. It's a nice short one today. With the summary, the only thing you need to know is what allows us to breathe. So what allows us to bring that air in? So what brings in the air? And it's all due to the negative pressure in the chest due to the increase in volume. And the next thing is what controls the breathing, and it's all due to the medulla oblongata, which detects CO2 through the use of H+. And we'll talk about why this connection is there on our next video. So I hope that helps. Don't forget to write down your one comment and at least one question, or more if you have them. Okay, so hopefully this helps. Thank you.